The restaurant was one of the most luxurious places in the city. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm golden light over the polished marble floor. Important business leaders, investors, and executives sat around the large table reserved for Daniel Carter, a rising businessman who was eager to impress everyone that night. Daniel believed this dinner could change his future. His company had been struggling recently, and he hoped the investors present would agree to support his next big project to make himself look successful and stable. He had insisted that his wife, Emily, attend the dinner with him. Emily was 7 months pregnant. Her soft blue dress gently covered her growing belly, and although she tried to smile politely, she felt tired and uncomfortable. The restaurant was loud. The lights were bright, and she hadn't been feeling well all day. Still, she came because Daniel told her it was important for his image. As the evening went on, waiters brought expensive food and bottles of red wine to the table. Daniel laughed loudly with his partners. Trying to act confident and charming, Emily mostly stayed quiet, sipping water and occasionally smiling when someone spoke to her. After a while, Emily began to feel dizzy. She slowly reached for her glass of water, but as she stretched her arm across the table, her hand accidentally touched a wine glass beside it. The glass tipped in a second. The red wine spilled across the white tablecloth. A few drops splashed onto Daniel's suit. The table suddenly went silent. Daniel froze for a moment, staring at the stain spreading across the fabric. His jaw tightened and his face slowly turned red with anger. "Emily, what did you just do?" he said in a low, dangerous voice. I'm sorry," Emily whispered nervously. It was an accident, but Daniel wasn't listening. He felt embarrassed in front of his investors. In his mind, Emily had ruined the perfect image he was trying to create. Without thinking, Daniel grabbed a full glass of red wine from the table. Before anyone could react, he stood up and threw the wine straight at Emily. The deep red liquid splashed across her dress, soaking the fabric and dripping onto the floor. Gasps filled the room. Everyone at the table stared in shock. Emily sat frozen in her chair, her eyes wide. The cold wine slowly slid down her dress and over her pregnant belly. Tears formed in her eyes, but she tried not to cry in front of everyone. "Maybe next time you'll be more careful," Daniel said coldly, sitting back down as if nothing had happened. No one spoke. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others avoided eye contact. One woman quietly shook her head in disbelief. Emily slowly stood up. Her hands trembled slightly as she grabbed her purse. "I'm going home," she said softly. Daniel didn't even look at her. "Fine, don't make another scene," he replied. Emily walked out of the restaurant alone, her dress still stained with wine and her heart heavier than ever. As she stepped into the cool night air, a tear finally rolled down her cheek. What Daniel didn't know was that someone at the dinner had recorded everything on their phone. And by the next morning, that video would reach someone very important. Emily's father. Emily stepped out of the restaurant into the cool night air, trying to control her emotions. The red wine had soaked through her dress, leaving dark stains across the soft blue fabric. People walking by glanced at her curiously, but she kept her head down and walked toward the street. Her heart felt heavy. She had endured Daniel's anger before, but never like this tonight. He had humiliated her in front of dozens of people. While she was carrying his child, Emily slowly sat inside a taxi and gave the driver her home address. During the ride, she stared silently out the window while city lights passed by. Her mind kept replaying the moment Daniel threw the wine. By the time she reached home, her eyes were red from holding back tears. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, the dinner continued awkwardly. Some guests tried to return to business conversations, but the atmosphere had completely changed. A few people whispered quietly about what they had just witnessed. One guest had recorded the entire incident on their phone. Later that night, the video began circulating privately. Among a few people who had attended the dinner, one of them felt especially disturbed by what happened. Knowing who Emily's father was, they decided he deserved to see the truth. Within hours, the video reached Robert Hayes. Robert Hayes was one of the most powerful investors in the country. His companies and investments were worth billions, and his name carried enormous influence in the business world. But more importantly, he was a devoted father who loved his only daughter deeply. It was nearly midnight when Robert received the message. He sat in his private office inside his large mansion, reviewing documents from the day's work. His phone buzzed on the desk. When he saw Emily's name mentioned in the message, he immediately opened the video, For the next 30 seconds, Robert watched silently. He saw his pregnant daughter sitting quietly at the table. He saw the wine spill by accident. Then he saw Daniel stand up and throw an entire glass of wine. Directly at her, the room on the video filled with shocked voices. Emily's humiliated expression froze on the screen. Robert slowly lowered the phone onto his desk. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then his expression changed. His calm face became cold. No one in the business world had ever mistaken Robert Hayes. For a weak man, he was known for being patient, strategic, and extremely powerful when it came to protecting his interests. And tonight, someone had hurt the one person he loved most. He picked up his phone and made the first call. "Get the financial team ready," he said calmly a few minutes later. He called his legal department. Then he contacted several trusted investment partners. Robert had already been aware that Daniel's company was struggling. Financially, the business had potential, but it was burdened with debts and unstable investors. To most people, buying such a company overnight would be impossible. But Robert Hayes was not most people by 2 in the morning. His team had begun quietly purchasing large amounts of company shares through multiple investment channels. By 4 in the morning, lawyers were preparing documents. And by sunrise, Robert Hayes was about to become the majority owner of Daniel Carter's company. While all of this was happening, Daniel slept peacefully in his luxury apartment. He had no idea that the worst morning of his life was only a few hours away. Daniel Carter woke up the next morning feeling unusually refreshed. The previous night's dinner seemed like a distant memory. He poured himself a cup of coffee and checked his emails, expecting the usual messages from his staff, investors, and partners. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He stretched, thinking he had managed to escape the embarrassment of last night. Without anyone noticing, by 9:08 a.m., Daniel arrived at his office in his sleek glass building downtown. The lobby was busy as usual, but the moment he stepped into his floor, a subtle tension filled the air. The receptionist gave him a nervous smile and directed him to the boardroom. "The board would like to see you immediately, Mr. Carter," she said. Daniel frowned. Nothing urgent had been scheduled. He walked quickly to the boardroom, trying to ignore the uneasy glances from his assistants and managers. When he opened the door, the atmosphere hit him like a cold wave. His entire executive team was there, their expressions serious. The chairman of the board, a man Daniel had always considered a mentor, rose slowly. "Daniel," the chairman said, his voice calm but firm, "we have some important news to share." Before Daniel could respond, the conference room door opened and a tall, imposing man walked in. Daniel froze. He recognized him immediately. It was Robert Hayes, Emily's father. The same man he had underestimated, the one whose daughter he had humiliated just hours before. Robert didn't raise his voice. He didn't yell. He simply looked around the room with piercing eyes. "Good morning, everyone," he said. "I trust we can get right to business." Daniel's mouth went dry. He took a step back. Unsure of what was happening, the chairman spoke again. "Robert Hayes has acquired the majority shares of your company?" Overnight, the words hit Daniel like a thunderclap. He shook his head. "That's impossible." He said he can't just buy a majority of my company. Robert calmly placed a folder on the table. Inside were legal documents, purchase agreements, and proof of the transactions. Daniel flipped through them, his hands trembling. Every signature, every number confirmed the truth. Robert Hayes now controlled the company Daniel had built over the past 10 years. "I gave you every opportunity to treat people with respect," Robert said, his voice low but unwavering. "You humiliated my daughter, who is carrying your child in front of your peers. Respect is more important than money, Daniel, and if you cannot show it, consequences follow." Daniel tried to speak, but no words came out. The realization hit him with crushing force. He had lost everything: the company, his reputation, and even the illusion of control he had held over his life. The boardroom remained silent as Robert continued. "Effective immediately, Daniel Carter will step down from his role as CEO. Any attempts to interfere with the company's operations will be met with legal action." Daniel sank into a chair, unable to believe how quickly his world had changed. Meanwhile, Robert turned to the board and smiled reassuringly. "We will ensure the company thrives, but it will never forget that dignity and respect come first." Later that morning, Emily received a call from her father. "You have nothing to fear," Robert said warmly. "I will always protect you and your child. You are safe and no one can hurt you again." Emily felt tears of relief stream down her face. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of security and love that Daniel had never provided. In Daniel, he was left alone in the empty boardroom, realizing that some mistakes can never be undone. The life he had built with arrogance and cruelty was gone, replaced by the consequences of his own actions. The world outside continued as usual. But inside that boardroom, a lesson had been learned. The price of disrespect and cruelty could never be measured in dollars.